There was actually multiple good open-world survival games to release in 2024, like Enshrouded, Palworld, Abiotic Factor, and even Stalker 2 somewhat fits into this category. But even with these new games, you're bound to run out eventually and return to a game that you've already played. And with Valheim being one of the best open-world survival games, I think it's good to ask the question, is it worth playing again in 2025? I'm Sam the Ashen, and this is Valheim. I'll keep the background short, but Valheim is a really successful open-world survival game released in 2021 on PC and eventually on Xbox. It's got over 400,000 reviews on Steam, with 94% being positive. It saw great success, and it's released several DLC-sized updates for free. And with the game already being priced at $20, it's really easy to make an argument for how much content you get for a pretty cheap price. So, even though Valheim is an open-world survival exploration game, there's actually pretty linear progression. Progression is mostly gear-based, and new gear is locked behind bosses and new biomes. There's a raven that flies in to give you some hints on what to do or where to go next when you're first starting out, or when you hit a big milestone. When you do first start, you're free to run around and do whatever you want. You could go explore and see what materials and what creatures you can find. You could search for a good spot for a house and start building. It's completely up to you. For a game with so much exploring, it's important for the exploration to actually be fun. While exploring, you'll come across new enemies, new materials, new dungeons with rare loot, maybe even a potential new base location, or maybe the perfect spot for a portal. The world is very vast, and most of your time in the game will probably be spent exploring. And it's pretty awesome. The world is beautiful to look at and fun to traverse. The world is also procedurally generated, which I have really mixed feelings on, but I think Valheim does it well. I'm not really versed in the technicalities of procedural generation, but it seems like the blueprint, so to speak, that the generation is based off of is great. For every boss, there's a new biome, and these aren't just little areas, they are massive maps with their own important aspects, like the Black Forest having tin and copper ore and dungeons, the ore for making bronze, which is your first real upgrade as far as weapons and armor, and then the dungeons containing special cores for making your first furnace to smelt the ore. There's also plenty of new foods to find when you're exploring a new biome, like blueberries in the Black Forest, queen bees for honey in the meadows, barley in the plains, and so on. Foods are massively important as they determine how much health and stamina you have. The better or more complex the food, the higher stats you'll have. So the formula is relatively similar for gearing up in each biome, but the methods you have to use and the variety of the landscape makes it feel different and satisfying each time. While out exploring, you're bound to continuously come across new enemies that you'll want to take down for materials. Your combat starts off super simple, with your options pretty much being a club and then maybe a wood shield too. You can dodge roll to avoid attacks, block if you can withstand the damage, or parry an attack to stagger the enemy. This lets you do double or triple damage depending on the weapon or shield, and I think it helps keep the combat engaging. Paying attention to enemy movesets, timing, stagger window, and weapon combos all help to keep you engaged in the combat. Eventually, you'll unlock more options for combat, like bows for ranged attacks, new weapon types like big hammers that do AoE damage, or knives that do extra parry damage, and all your swords and maces. There's several different damage types, like pierce or slash, that are more effective against some enemies than others. And eventually, there's elemental damage that are extra good or weak depending on the enemy. Way later in the game, you'll even unlock magic that lets you shoot fireballs or frost bolts, or even raise the dead to help you fight. This is all to say that while the combat isn't super complex, I think it's deep and varied enough to keep people engaged and entertained for an extended time. A big part of the game is boss fights. Each boss is a pretty big deal progression-wise, and each new boss is in a new biome. which kinda opens up a gameplay loop of explore, fight, craft, build, upgrade, fight boss, and I think it works really well. It also helps a lot that these boss fights are really well done. The enemy designs are really cool. They all vary wildly in their movesets and abilities. The fights are pretty tough. They require a good amount of preparation, which makes beating them all the more rewarding. Another big part of the game is base building. You start off with a pretty limited array of building options, but it grows more and more as you progress, going from wood walls to stone to crystal, metal gates, and furniture like torches, beds, dragon heads, fireplaces, and more. The decorations also serve more than just looking cool. The better decorations you have, the longer your rested bonus will last. You can use a hoe to flatten out the land for your home. You can make a garden to grow important crops. You can tame wild boxes to ride around or harvest meat and fur, raise chicken for eggs, and more. Later in the game, you can even make ballistas to protect your base from the inevitable raids that will periodically come to challenge you. The polar opposites between fighting ice dragons and spinning yarn out of flax at your cozy cabin is a great contrast for the player to not get burnt out on one or two things. Now, unfortunately, it's time to talk about the problems that I do have with Valheim, and there are a few. To generalize, at least for now, my biggest complaint is how grindy the game can feel, especially for a solo player. You have an encumbrance limit, which is standard for these games, but in my opinion, in Valheim, it is way too low by default. Now, there are portals to counteract the time you would take running back and forth every time you need to go back home. The only problem is, you can't really take anything important through the portals. For example, ore is really heavy, so you can't really carry that much. This would be totally alleviated by a portal, but ore can't go through a portal. So if you're unlucky with your world seed, and you have to sail across the sea to get to a swamp, then you'll spend hours to get iron from the swamp back to your base, only to run out and need more eventually because metals are incredibly important. Look, I get it. These rules for the portal are there on purpose. I just don't agree with them. If you had 10 people playing together, this honestly wouldn't be that bad. But I'm pretty sure that most people aren't playing in groups of 10. They're playing solo or with 2, maybe 3 friends. I'll admit, the portal rules are a huge hang-up for me, and I really would only want the developers to just add some settings to be able to turn it off, or at least for solo worlds. Without that, your only option is to turn on God mode and fly across the map, or use mods to disable the portal rules. I guess I should be grateful that even those two options exist. Now that I think about it, my complaints really just boil down to the game being super grindy at times, so if you are playing with a group, or are okay with using mods, or you like to take your time and just enjoy the ride, then I don't think this will be a big deal for you, which is great. I'm happy for you, and a little jealous. Valheim is really an amazing game. The world is incredibly beautiful, the art style is unique, the combat is fun and engaging. The boss fights are unique. The progression is satisfying. And the gameplay loop is addictive. If you've never played Valheim, or if it's been a long time since you have played, I really strongly recommend to play the game in 2025. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really had fun playing the game to make this video. And if you did enjoy, leaving a like on the video really does help me out a lot. If you have any thoughts, I would love to hear them in the comments. And if you want to see more from me, subscribe. I post once every other week on Sunday, so I'll never clog up your feed. I hope you have a good one. Peace out.